So let's begin by generating positive motivation, and then offering a mandala and going for refuge. Right, so just like yesterday morning, first, get comfortable in your meditation posture, and then visualize yourself surrounded by all sentient beings, beginning with your mother of this life, immediately to your left, all your female friends and family to your left and behind you, and then your father of this life to your right, and all your male friends and family to your right and behind you. And remember how you're interconnected with them. You're engaging in this session and the sessions today in order to accomplish their welfare as well as your own. The two are inseparable. One's own welfare and welfare of others. So beginning with friends and family, but they're part of the same thing. So as we generate a motivation, it's especially important to remember that all of the suffering we've ever experienced all comes about in dependence upon the self-centered attitude, the selfish mind, seeking one's own welfare alone, at the exclusion of concern about anyone else whatsoever. And every happiness we experience comes about through caring about others. Of course, caring about ourselves, but within that, including others. So every happiness we've ever experienced comes about not only in dependence upon others, but in dependence upon our caring about others. Right. So of course, what we do in this session, what we do each day, and especially in Dharma activities, so especially in this session, then we want to create causes for well-being, the well-being of ourselves and others. So it's important to generate a motivation of caring about others, trying to use our life to benefit others. So in that regard, then we think about those whom we have the closest relationships with, especially benevolent relationships with first, friends and family, and generate the aspiration to do something to benefit them. And then think about those whom we have the most difficult relationships with. Oftentimes it's the very same people. So we can visualize them also in front as well. So we visualize the people we're most prone to become angry with, most prone to harm. And so we need to practice great caution with regard to how we think about them, how we view them, how we relate to them. So these the class of enemies or antagonists, we visualize directly in front of us, facing towards us. And then visualize all the other sentient beings who in this life we have no particular affinity for or aversion to, but in countless past lives and countless future lives also. Sometimes they'll be dear friends or family members, sometimes they'll be enemies, and so forth. So we visualize all the other sentient beings, hell beings, hungry ghosts, animals, other humans, and then devas and demigods, the form and formless, the desire form and formless realm. So imagine them all in human form, seated all around us. And imagine all of these sentient beings engaging in this session together with oneself. And then, so as we're visualizing them, then generate the aspiration that we can do something to free them from suffering and accomplish their welfare and their well-being. So try to generate a sense of personal responsibility that, it's my responsibility to do whatever I can to benefit all sentient beings. But then, we have to be realistic that, the more limitations we have, the less we can do for the welfare of ourselves, not to mention the welfare of other sentient beings. So we have to, learn to overcome all of our limitations, abandon all of our faults. And the more positive qualities we have, the more wisdom, kindness, generosity, energy, enthusiasm that we have, the more we can do to benefit ourselves and also other sentient beings. So try to generate the aspiration to completely eliminate all of one's own faults and perfect every possible positive quality. Right? So in short, to quickly achieve the state of full enlightenment, the state within which we've abandoned all faults and perfected every positive quality, in order to work perfectly for the welfare of all sentient beings. So try to generate this aspiration to achieve full enlightenment in order to accomplish the welfare of all sentient beings. And for that reason, I'm engaged in this session. Before you, so if you like, visualize Shakyamuni Buddha. So just as I described yesterday, visualize Shakyamuni Buddha in the space in front of you, and remember or recognize that he's one essence with your own root guru, and with all the other Buddhas. They're all one essence, just appearing in different aspects. And then so remember the teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha, is the Buddha jewel, the Buddha refuge, and then his teachings are the Dharma refuge, and then the spiritual community that upholds his teachings, which includes Shakyamuni Buddha, is the Sangha refuge. So then try to recollect the suffering of not only this life, but the potential suffering of future lives. Right? If we accumulate lots of negative karma and then when that ripens, the suffering we experience in future lives, ourselves and also other sentient beings. And then all of the suffering, the oceans of samsaric suffering, all of the different misery and difficulty, confusion, depression, sadness, and misfortune experienced by, not only ourselves, but countless other sentient beings in samsara, and generate some kind of wise fear or aversion of that, trepidation at the thought of the endless suffering of samsara. So this is one cause of going for refuge, this kind of wise fear. And then the second cause is the recognition that the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, which are one nature with their own guru, they have the ability to protect us from the sufferings of samsara, from the suffering of low realms, and the suffering of future lives at the very least, especially the suffering of low realms and all of the suffering of samsara. So try to recognize how the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, the three jewels of refuge, have the ability to protect us from suffering of samsara. How? By teaching us the karma, especially the law of cause and effect. What are the causes of samsara? What are the causes of liberation? And thereby giving us the ability to practice in accordance with those, and thereby to free ourselves from samsara and to achieve liberation. So try to generate some faith to whatever degree you authentically can. Generate faith in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. And then we can, so in our heart, we make a request for guidance in this session. And then we offer a mandala. So I'll share my screen here and put up the mandala offering. Prayer, so we'll recite both verses today. See if I can run them all. This ground, anointed with perfume, streaming flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon, imagine this as a Buddha field and off. May all living beings enjoy this pure land, O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom. Please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. And then we recite the refuge and Bodhisattva. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through explaining the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. So then visualize from Shakyamuni Buddha's holy body, first white light rays radiate out, pervading the entire universe, purifying oneself, and then flow in through the crown of one's head, purifying one's entire body, speech and mind, and the same with all the other sentient beings seated around us. Imagine their body, speech, and mind are completely purified of any faults, cause of suffering, and the cause of suffering, negative karma, and afflictive emotions. So imagine especially their minds are completely purified of any disturbing thought or feeling whatsoever. And then imagine golden light rays radiate out from Shakyamuni Buddha's holy body. On the tip of each golden light ray is an emanation of Shakyamuni Buddha. So first one comes to the crown of your own head, and then your body is completely filled with blissful golden light, which blesses you to develop all the positive qualities, all the realizations on the path to enlightenment from perfect faith, guru devotion, on up to realization of compassion and emptiness, wisdom of emptiness. And then the same happens with all the other sentient beings seated around you. They develop every happiness, from mundane happiness up to the peerless happiness of full enlightenment. And then imagine an emanation of Shakyamuni Buddha, the Shakyamuni Buddha in space in front of you shrinks down to the size of like the tip of your thumb, and then comes to the space above the crown of your head and abides there during the session, to bless and kind of inspire you while you're listening and contemplating and meditating. Okay, so I stop there with the preliminaries. I know I was thinking yesterday, when we're meditating in the course, in the context of this course, as with many kind of courses, especially online, we don't have so much time, right? So we don't spend a lot of time doing preliminary practices, especially because like in one session, we do some motivation and refuge at the beginning, and then I need to explain some stuff, and then we have question and answer and discussion, and then we have to do a little meditation as well. So the time we actually spend meditating is quite short generally. But like I was looking, I think I put it on the reading list of this book. You could see this book. I don't know, it's reversed there. The Meditation on the Nature of the Mind. It's got some commentary by the Dalai Lama. The main text is by Kuntun Peltzat Mundrup, and the translation is by Jose Cabazon. There's some commentary by him. This is a very good book for covering some of the stuff we're looking at, although it goes in a lot more, a lot deeper than we're going in this course. Actually, for Kays was asking something about Dzogchen yesterday. This is a really interesting book because it's in the book list actually that Shanti sent out to you before the course. But it's a very interesting book because actually it's written by Konten Pelger Lundrum, the author of the main text translated in that book. He's actually the seventh abbot of Serje Monastery, of my monastery, where I am here in South India. He's the seventh abbot of the monastery. He was also a tutor of, I think he was a tutor of the fifth Dalai Lama. So he's, so he's living and writing about, how many generations would that be? Probably roughly like 6 or 7 generations after Lama Tsongkhapa, who's the founder of the Gelug tradition, whose anniversary of his passing away is on December 10th. And I think Root Institute asked me to lead some program on that day, which I haven't replied to yet, but I will. Shanti. Oh yeah, so this Konten Pelger Lundrup, so he's very much in the Gelug, he's very much a Gelugpa Lama, a Gelugpa scholar, right? But he's also very Rime. He studied, just as Lama Tsongkhapa did, he studied and practiced under masters of all the other 3 traditions, not only the Gelug tradition, but also he had teachers who are Nyingma Lamas and Shakya and Kagyu as well. So he's very Rime Lama. But this text is especially important because basically it's, I mean, he's a Gelugpa Lama, but the main commentary he's basing this text on, which is about how to meditate on the mind, the conventional ultimate nature of the mind. The main text he's basing it on is by Gampopa, or a teaching lineage of Gampopa. So of course you probably know Gampopa is one of the main disciples of Milarepa. So it's very much in the Kagyu lineage. But he says at the outset that teaching lineage of Gampopa is based on a teaching given by Padma Sambhava, right, the founder of the Nyingma school in Tibet. So it's very much a text that kind of looking at the commonalities between the Gelug kind of way of meditating on the mind, and the Kagyu and Mahamudra, Kagyu Mahamudra, or Gelug Kagyu Mahamudra, and also the Dzogchen, some practices from Dzogchen. I think not the highest, but some kind of preliminary practices to Dzogchen. But like the kind of point I was getting to is, I know in this context of doing meditation in a course like this, we don't have a lot of time to do the preliminary practices, but those are very important. I just wanted to emphasize that to you all. When you're meditating on your own, I know, well, basically it's recommended. We do, I did explain like the posture. So the first thing is, sit in a comfortable posture, then generate a motivation, go for refuge. But then the main thing we're leaving out is the 7-limb prayer, or the 7-limb practice is more appropriate, and Guru Yoga, right, as a preliminary. So so in the 7-limb practice, it's like, you have practices like homage, prostration, making offerings, confession, rejoicing, requesting the Guru to remain, requesting the Guru to teach, and then dedication. And then usually make a mandala offering, and then make requests to the Guru, and then you do meditation, right? So those are all preliminaries. But those preliminaries, they're really important, because to have success, for things to go well in our meditation practice, we need merit on the one hand. We need a store of positive energy, and we also need to purify our obscurations. We need to purify the afflictive aspects of our own mind, because those are obstacles to generating insight while we're meditating. So the main way to purify those is to confess the negative things we've done, and using the 4 opponent powers, where we generate regret. First, we rely, the power of reliance on compassion and on refuge, our faith, and then generate the power of regret, seeing the negative things we've done, harmful things we've done in the past, and then the power of the antidote, Yeah, where we do something positive as a counteracting force to the negative things we've done in the past. And then the power of restraint, where we make a determination not to do those things again in the future. So that, that applying the four opponent powers in a practice of purification, and it really helps to kind of, it's kind of like if you're going to plant, like vegetables and flowers in a garden, in a flower bed or in a garden. If it's full of weeds and you just plant the seeds anyway, you can't expect to have, very good crop, of vegetables or very good, very beautiful flowers, very healthy plants come up, because the flower bed or the garden bed is full of weeds, which are taking up all the energy and all the space and kind of destroying the conditions to have a good crop of vegetables or beautiful flowers come up. So first you need to pull out the weeds from the ground in which you want to plant your flowers or your vegetables. So it's kind of like that in our mind. If our mind is full of, is cluttered with kind of negative energies, be it karma or afflictive emotions or just distraction, but especially there's kind of the remnants of greed or strong attachment or selfishness or jealousy and so forth. If our mind is full of those kind of disturbing energies, then we try to meditate, it won't go very well. So just doing a purification practice, it can help in that very moment to purify the mind and create a good, clean kind of field in which to try to develop positive qualities, right? So, and then in addition to that, we do virtuous things, like by making offerings, rejoicing in the virtuous actions of ourselves and others, and then offering mandala, and then making requests to a guru. I mean, the whole thing about the reliance on a guru is kind of one of the more mystical aspects of Buddhism, but it's good, to experiment with, right? When it's difficult to find a rational explanation of something, it's good to try to just gain firsthand experience by trying, trial and error. So yeah, that's what I'd recommend. But definitely, I mean, in my own experience, I definitely find it helps a lot when we make a sincere offering to our guru, make a sincere request for guidance and inspiration. Like I find it really does make a difference. I mean, even from session to session, one session you do, one session you don't. One day you do, one day you don't. I think you can see a difference, but it's very subtle thing. So you try in your own experience. But yeah, but it's very important to. So in this commentary that I was saying, in this Konton Peljo Lundrup's commentary, he describes at the very outset, he describes meditations that are quite similar to what we've been doing. But before that, he emphasizes the importance of not just rushing through or skipping the preliminaries, but doing the preliminaries well as a way of laying the ground, creating a good basis for for meditating. Yeah. So I just wanted to emphasize that, although we're not going through those much here in this course, and these days, even when His Holiness Dalai Lama gives teachings online, or Lama Zopa Rinpoche gives teachings online, yeah, they don't spend much time on the preliminaries. They don't say much about the preliminaries usually, largely because there's kind of lack of time, I imagine. But it's important to do those when you can. Of course, sometimes when you have less time, you just make them very short, and sometimes when you have more time, you do in a more elaborate way. But it definitely makes a difference. Okay, so let's see. So I said in these 4 sessions, so this is the 3rd session we're on now, that we'll divide up. We'll spend each session roughly on one topic. So the first session yesterday was mainly looking at the importance and the usefulness, the benefit of meditating on the mind, and how it kind of fits in different aspects of the Buddhist path. Then the second session yesterday afternoon was on yesterday evening here in India, was on the nature of the mind, right? The definition of the mind, different kinds of mind, sort of what the mind is, and especially trying to identify the mental consciousness. right, versus the sense consciousness. Right. So today in this session now, I want to try to look more at more kind of ways of trying to identify the mental consciousness, but especially looking at how it changes, its impermanence, right? So how our mind is changing moment by moment, and especially how it's arising each moment, how our mind is arising and changing, and passing away, of course, which is, what does change mean? Change means for something that didn't exist before to newly exist, right? And for something to newly come into existence means that the things which caused that to newly come into existence, they have to go out of existence, right? So one of the best examples for, well, and then before I go into then also I want to cover this morning session, then start to get into kind of looking at dependent arising, different kinds of dependent arising, and how our mind is a dependent arising. So looking at dependent arising, I want to focus mostly on, first of all, how our mind is a dependent arising, but then also look at how as a person we're dependent arising. So look at both of those. Because in some aspects, trying to understand the subtlety of dependent arising, it's a little easier to look at the person, how as a person we're dependent arising. But as a but then we want to use the same reasoning looking at why a person is a dependent arising, especially how a person exists in dependence upon mental imputation, right, or labeling by concepts. How that kind of dependent arising applies also to the mind equally in the same way. So that's a precursor for what we'll do this afternoon, which is try to look at how the mind is empty of inherent existence, right? The ultimate nature of the mind. So, okay. So first, let's try to. I'll explain a little bit, and then we'll do a little bit of meditation on the impermanent nature of the mind. So one of the most typical, and because it's the best examples for looking at impermanence, is a seed and a sprout, right? So think about seed. I don't know, what's your favorite kind of seed? Your favorite kind of plant? Well, your favorite kind of seed probably has to do with your favorite kind of plant, I imagine. Whatever your favorite kind of plant is, then the seed that produces that plant should be your favorite kind of seed. I would imagine, but not necessarily. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I'm just thinking about my own. I like guavas a lot, but there's some guavas. We have a guava tree outside of our not guavas, avocado. Avocado is a nice big seed, right? You can't miss it. So we have an avocado tree outside of our house, which is over that way. And I was in it this year because during the pandemic I was in Dharamsala. So when the tree was full of avocados, unfortunately I wasn't here. And the only monk who was here, he doesn't like avocados particularly. So a lot of the avocados just fell on the ground around where the tree was. And then so when I got back, I just got a couple avocados off the tree just at the end of the season. But now there's a lot of avocado seeds with sprouts. The shoots are about, I don't know, about half a meter high now, growing out of the avocado seeds the avocados and the seeds that fell to the ground under that tree. So that's where I've seen seeds and sprouts, a good example of seeds and sprouts recently. But yeah, that's kind of an interesting example. So, but and let me, before I get into the kind of debate, so generally, it's a good example because, well, first of all, impermanent things. We can divide up everything that exists into two groups: things that are impermanent and things that are permanent, right? So everything that exists in the world, right, is either, it fits in one of these two groups. It's either impermanent, which my internet, remember my internet connection is impermanent, right? So I'm just getting a message here that it's unstable. Yeah, so everything in the world is either impermanent or permanent. So what does it mean to be impermanent? First of all, it means momentarily changing. Yeah, kijikma. It's momentary. So it means it's a momentarily changing phenomena. Right? So phenomena just means that exists. That it's momentarily changing means yeah, that basically it means that it's continually changing, without ever not changing. So basically it means that. So whatever is impermanent here, I mean, we have to remember in the context of Buddhist philosophy, terms have very specific meanings, which might be slightly different than the normal English usage, right? So here, anything that's impermanent means that it's changing continually. So what does it mean that something's changing? It means that each moment, some new state, each moment it's different than it was in the moment before, right? So the way something exists in each moment is new. Means it didn't exist in that way before. So it's now existing in some new way that it didn't before. So the way it existed before has ceased to exist. It's gone out of existence. So we have to, I mean, it helps to add here, maybe I'll bring in a different prop, because this prop, sure, we use this prop. This is my watch. This is the watch on my desk. When we're meditating, I keep glancing at this watch to see how much time we have left to meditate, how much is gone. So yeah, so like this watch, well, this watch exists through time. Actually, I've had it for about 4 years now, I think, but it's probably existed at least 5 years, I imagine. But even now you can see in the moments I'm holding it in the screen, I mean, so you can see it, it exists through time. So how is it that each moment, it's not that each moment the watch comes into existence, but each moment this watch is different than it was before. And with watch, especially an analog watch like this, well, a digital watch is the same. It's easy to see because I don't know, you can see the face. I don't know if you can see you can see it's moving, right? Is the second hand moving? God, it looks like it stopped. It's moving. So you can see movement. Actually, you can see the hands, the second hand at least, moving. Most of us, we don't have patience to look at the minute hand long enough to see it moving, but it does. Again, when you look back, you can see it's moved. So yeah. So even though but the point is, even though this watch, or like my mug from yesterday, they exist through time. They have a duration through time. But while they exist, each moment they're different than they were in the moment before, right? So we can imagine so let's just, in order to speak about in a comfortable way, we can imagine like the first moment of this watch, the second moment of the watch, the third moment of the watch. Each of those are different phenomena, right? The first moment of the watch, the second moment of the watch, the third moment of the watch, and so forth, on up to thousands or millions of moments, they all are part of the continuum of this watch, right? So there's a first moment of this watch, and then in the very next moment, there's a second moment of this watch. In the very next moment, there's a third moment of this watch. So all of those moments of the watch, they're each different from one another, but they're each very, because they're extremely similar to one another, then they're all part of the same continuum of this watch. So remember I was speaking about continuum, this idea of a continuum yesterday. It means kind of, well, like the best example for a continuum is a river. It's a continuum of water flowing across a landscape. So why is it a continuum? Because there's many different parts of the river. Like you can think there's the first kilometer, the second kilometer, the third kilometer, the fourth kilometer of the river, but they're all connected. They're conjoined with one another. And the one flows into the next through the landscape, right? So like that, here our landscape we can think is kind of like time. And so like that, the first moment of the watch, it flows into the second moment of the watch. The second moment of the watch flows into the third moment. The third moment flows into the fourth moment. So by flow into, I mean, it's kind of loose terminology. It doesn't mean that the first moment, well, in this case, it doesn't mean that the first moment becomes the second moment, right? Because actually the first moment of the watch, it goes out of existence. And in its place arises the second moment of the watch. The second moment of the watch, you know, it goes out of existence, and in its place arises the third moment of the watch in a way. But actually, I mean, the stuff that, you know, the watch that exists in the first moment, it actually does become the watch that exists in the second moment and the third moment and the fourth. So in a way, it is kind of like the one moment does, the stuff of the one does flow into the next. But it's important to remember that, like, yeah. So that, well, what we want to get to is that each moment of the watch, and here, I mean, each moment, it's not like it's just a conceptual way to divide up this continual change. You know, it's just kind of like, it's kind of like in the actual watch here, I mean, this is kind of a cheap watch, so I mean, it's a pretty good watch actually. It's not that bad. It's kind of an average watch, but like, you know, with a cheap analog watch, the second hand it clicks, right? It goes click, 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 click. Whereas time doesn't go click, 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 right? Time moves in a continual flow, right? There's no clicks to it. So I've been told, my friend, his father collected, his father's passed away now, but he collected Rolex watches, apparently, really good watches. So he was telling me on a really expensive watch, which I think last time actually when I went to France a couple of year and a half ago, actually I was in the de Gaulle airport in Paris, and there was a Rolex watch, and they had some watches displayed in the window. So anyway, my friend told me, like, really expensive watches, like Rolex watches, the second hand doesn't go click, click, click. It was a continual movement, right? Which is much better reflection of actually how time moves. So I went and I looked, and it was true actually. There were the second hand continually moves. So but so it's similar when we talk about, you know, the first moment of the watch, the second moment of the watch, third moment of the watch, fourth moment of the watch. That's just a conceptual way of kind of labeling different parts of the continuum of the watch. But it's not that those are kind of exist from the side of the object, or those have some concrete reality. You know, actually, you know, any impermanent phenomena, it's continually changing without break, right? And just like time is continually moving, any impermanent phenomena, it's continually unfolding in time. It's continually emerging. So, um, so, but usually we use, as an example for an impermanent phenomenon, we often use a seed and a sprout. Because they're just very, you know, it's a common example we see in the world around us. But because it's kind of clear that, you know, the seed, it produces a sprout, right? The seed is a cause. Like, so we can stick with my avocado. So the avocado seed, at the time the seed exists, the sprout hasn't yet been produced, right? But then the seed produces a sprout. So it's like the seed actually, it's the stuff of the seed actually becomes the sprout, right? There's the matter. It's a physical thing, right? So the matter of the seed actually, it, you know, you know, like a month later when it grows a sprout, it's actually the matter of the seed actually becomes the root, and then becomes the stem, you know, and then the leaves and so forth. So that matter actually transforms into the sprout. So with the seed and the sprout, typically it's quite easy to see how at the time of the cause, the seed, so the seed is a cause and the sprout is its effect. Right? So we have a seed and a sprout, a cause and an effect. So at the time of the cause, the seed, the effect does not yet exist. Right? But then when the effect comes into existence, so the sprout, is the effect, right? So at the time the effect exists, the seed, right, the cause has ceased to exist, does not exist anymore. So it's a little, maybe it's even easier to see with, so back to my watch again. So sorry to jump around between examples, but different examples kind of illustrate different things a little better. So my watch, the first moment of the watch is a cause of the second moment of the watch. Right? The second moment of the watch is a cause of the third moment of the watch, and so on and so on. Right? So at the time of the first moment of the watch, at the time the first moment of the watch is existing in the present moment, does the second moment of the watch exist at that time? No, of course not. I mean, to make a more gross example, like say I'm like make a bigger unit of time, years we can take. We take a person, say a person who's 10 years old. At that time that they're 10 years old, are they 11 years old also? No, of course not. They're not yet. They're only 10 years old. They're not 11. They're only after 6 months or a year will they become 11 years old, right? Or one day, even depends when when in their 10th year they're existing. But generally, if someone's in the middle of their 10th year, if they're 10 years old, they're not also 11 years old at that time. So the being 10 years old is a cause of being 11 years old, right? You can't be 11 years old without having first been 10 years old, can you? No, they're cause and effect. So um, mm, um, so everything's impermanent. So I know I'm kind of digressing and going in different directions here, but we'll try to bring it all together. Right? So everything that is impermanent is continually changing, right? So what does it mean that something is continually changing? It means that in each moment, the thing is different than it was in the moment before, right? So what that means is each moment is an effect of causes that preceded that moment, right? So the second moment of the watch is an effect of the first moment of the watch, and an effect of the things, all the causes that went before that. And so while the second moment of the watch is an effect of the first moment of the watch, it is also a cause of the third moment of the watch. Right? So here, imagine my three fingers are the three moments of the watch. So this is the first moment. The first moment, it's a cause of the second moment. Second moment is a cause of the third moment. So that's kind of the forward progression. Then if we look back, the third moment is an effect of what? Of the foregoing moments. The third moment is an effect of the second moment. The second moment is an effect of the first moment, right? So like that. So like the 11-year-old person is an effect of themselves when they were 90. Right? Well, think of things exist in this moment. We're an effect of, are you the same person now that as the person who just was, we were doing a meditation when we were generating a motivation, like how long ago? 45 minutes ago? 45 minutes ago, we started this session and we spent some, 10, 15 minutes generating a motivation. So are you exactly the same person now as you were 45 minutes ago? No, yeah, all of you nod your head. No, definitely. Very good. Paul's saying yes. I think he said. I said exactly the same, Paul, and not just the same person, exactly the same person. Well, I don't know. It is debatable. We are the same person, right? Because the same person, but we've changed, right? So maybe a better way to phrase the question is, have you changed in the last 45 minutes? Yes, we've all changed in the last 45 minutes. Have we changed in the last 5 seconds? Yes. Are we changing right now? Yes, we are changing. Change is inevitable. So for impermanent things, we are impermanent. My watch is impermanent. The avocado seed and sprout, they're impermanent. So for all impermanent things, they're continually changing. And each present moment, so just look at the present, each present moment is an effect or product of the moments that went before, basically. Is an effect of causes that existed, or to be more precise, each present moment of any impermanent thing is an effect of causes that preceded it in the moments before. And each impermanent thing is a cause of other things that will come into existence in the moments that follow, right? So there's causes exist in the time before, and effects exist in the time after. So the reason we usually use a seed, yeah. So and the sprout is because it's quite clear that at the time of the seed, the sprout doesn't exist, but it's a cause. Then the sprout arises from the seed. At the time of the sprout, the seed has ceased to exist. Um, but with I picked a great example for debate because with the avocado seed, it's such a big seed that even the avocado seed, it gives rise to a um, follows that being Paul is permanent. No, it doesn't follow that being Paul is permanent. So with the avocado seed, it's such a big seed that even when it produces a sprout, it looks like the seed is still there, because the seed hardly changes. It's such a big seed that it produces a sprout. The sprout is coming out, but you can look and it looks like the seed is almost unchanged. But yeah, anyway. So yeah, I don't want to spend too long on this. So we want to do some meditation. So how do we use this to meditate on our mind, right? The mind. Well, first of all, before I go on to that, I should just to kind of sum up here. So anything that is impermanent is changing continually, right? So when we look at a very small things that have a very small duration in time, like one moment of the watch, like a shortest possible moment of the watch. I mean, actually, is there a shortest possible moment of the watch? But say, I mean, in Buddhist texts, so I mean, these Buddhist philosophers are philosophizing like 2,000 years ago. But so they describe a shortest moment in time. Basically, what they're talking about is the shortest moment that an ordinary person can perceive. When we look at something changing continually, what's the shortest moment that an ordinary person can perceive? So they describe a shortest. You can divide that into like 63 parts or something, 65 parts. So one of the 165th of a youthful person's finger snap as being like a shortest moment. But actually, yeah, I mean, maybe a better analogy is, think of like movies, the old, before the digital age, when movies were, in a movie theater, they're projected from, with a projector that's shining light through a film or film reel, right? So it's said that something, in order that we don't, each frame is still, but it's a little different than the frame before. So by flashing the frames up so quickly on the screen that we can't see each frame, we see continual, what appears to our eyes, continual movement, right? So to have enough frames that you see continual movement as opposed to seeing flashing frames, you have to have, what is it, like 25 or 26 frames per second, something like that. If you have less than that, you'll see flashing frames up on a screen. As long as you have more than that, you see continual movement on the screen. So it's kind of similar to that, but again, that's just a conceptual way. When we divide up, something that exists through time. So I was saying this watch it exists through time and has a continuity of time. Just like as a person, we're changing continually, but we exist over a duration of time, right? So Paul was, I think, bringing up the kind of debate that those seem contradictory. For one thing to exist through time, um, and um, and for something to be changing. So if we're continually changing, doesn't it mean that we're something different each moment? No, not necessarily, because things can have a duration, exist in a duration through time. But there's a lot of avenues for debate, around argument around that. Um, but basically, because actually Hume, in David Hume, the English philosopher, in his treatise on, I think it's called On Human Nature, there's a chapter about the self, which is really fascinating. It almost looks like he received teachings from some Buddhist teacher. It's so his analysis of what a person is, and how things basically exist independent upon naming and labeling and mental imputation is extremely similar to the Buddhist view. But he makes, I found the way he wrote about this particular point, it kind of made it more clear to me than many ways many Buddhist scholars describe it. But the way he describes it is, why do we, it's true that each moment we're a different, each moment we are, as a person, just think of us as a person, each moment we're different than we were before. So doesn't it mean that we're a different person? Each moment we're a different person. But then that's totally contradictory to just our common sense view of what we are as a person. We feel like, no, I existed 1 hour ago. I exist now. I will exist in 1 hour, probably. I existed, from several years ago, and I exist now. So what do we mean when we say that? Is we mean not that we're not changing. We are changing every moment, but that we're changing slightly, and such that the similarity between the person, between the way we exist now and the way we existed a moment ago is predominant. It's extremely similar. So because of this extreme similarity, because there is the me that exists in this moment, and there's the me that exists in the previous moment, and those are different, but they're not different people, right? To be different people means you're part of a different continuum. So because those two moments of different things are part of the same continuum, then we say that they are the same person. So any object that exists through time, it does have different moments, and those moments are different from the ones that preceded them, and they're different from the moments that succeed them or that follow them, right? But because so why are those moments all part of the same continuum? Because they're extremely similar. It's because of the similarity of properties that a thing has. So this watch has many different moments. The first moment, the second moment, the third moment. But why are those all moments of this watch? Because although they're slightly different from one another, their properties are primarily similar. And so with our mind, we label as all parts of the same continuum, part of the same watch. And that makes sense. That way of talking about it. So our minds, and as a person, so these two are very important for our analysis of dependent arising and emptiness later on. So as a person, we are continually changing, right? But yet we have a duration through time, we exist through time. And our minds are also continually changing, and yet they exist through time. So that's what it means to say that we're impermanent. Our minds are impermanent. As a person, we're impermanent. And anything that is impermanent is like that. Anything that's mental phenomena is impermanent. And then there's a miscellaneous catch-all category called non-associated compositional factors. So as a person, we are not something physical, and we're not something mental, but we are we're basically we're a possessor. We possess parts that are physical. We possess our body, right? So part of us, part of our constituents, right? We have many different parts, right? Part of our constituents. So not like political, not like we're a politician and we're representing like constituents, but like as something that possesses parts, the parts that we're composed of. So our body our hands, our legs, our joints, our tissue, our organs. Those are all constituents of our body, and those are all parts of us. Right? So we, as a person, we possess some parts that are physical, all the parts of our body, and then we possess some parts that are mental, right? So all the aspects of our five sense consciousness, our mental consciousness, all of our thoughts, our memories, our imagination, our opinions, and so forth. Those are all mental phenomena, right? So all those mental phenomena are also part of us as a person. But we are not our body, and we are not our mind. We're something that possesses a body and mind, and yet we're impermanent. So what kind of impermanent thing are we? We're not physical, we're not a mental, we're this third category called non-associated compositional factor. Yeah, so it means that basically we're an impermanent thing that is not physical and not mental. So, okay, so anything that is impermanent is also an effect of causes that preceded it, and anything that is impermanent is a cause of effects that follow it, right? So these three terms, impermanent, cause, and effect, they are synonyms. Not, well, I mean, you could say they're not synonyms in that they mean the same thing. So they're probably not synonyms actually, but they are, well, they're synonymous in that whatever one is also the other, right? So whatever is impermanent is also a cause, right, of effects that will follow it. Whatever is a cause is also an effect of causes that preceded it, right? So this we're going to look at. We look at, when we meditate, we look at with our own mind. First, we'll look at, is it true that my mind is impermanent? Is it changing moment by moment? Does it ever stop changing for even the slightest moment? Right? We'll easily be able to see, no, it doesn't. It's continually changing. And then is my my mind in this moment, in the present moment, is it an effect, first of all? Does it arise from causes that produced it? I mean, it can help to look at the other options, right? If something's not an effect, then either it has always existed, it never, remember, what does it mean to be an effect or a product? It means something is produced, which means there was a time when it did not exist before, and then it newly came into existence, right? So if something is not an effect, it means either, well, it doesn't exist. So when we look at our mind, we see, well, obviously it exists. Or it could mean that it never came into existence, right? So here there's already, I can see Paul smiling. He's probably thinking of the debate I'm thinking of. There's already a big debate with the mind now. Because Buddhism, we say the mind is beginningless, right? Which would mean there is no time when our stream, not just mind in general, it means our stream of consciousness, right? The stream of consciousness, which we're experiencing right now, in Buddhism, we say it's beginningless. It doesn't have a beginning. So how does that jive with being impermanent? Well, first of all, it's changing. We can see our mind is changing moment by moment, right? So it's not a problem. But did our mind ever come into existence? That's a bit of a difficult one. Did our stream of consciousness? Because for something to come into existence, there had to be a time when it did not exist, and then a time when it newly existed, right? So a stream of consciousness, did it ever not exist? Yeah, I mean, the textbook answer is no. It's beginningless. Well, I don't know. But no, you probably have to say, yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, that one I'm not sure. Does our mind predate the Big Bang? Yes, it does. Kevin asked in the chat, does our mind predate the Big Bang? Yes, we are all older than the Big Bang. In relation to us as a person, the Big Bang is just a recent event. We're much older. Yeah, sentient beings have no beginning. And each sentient being, each individual sentient being has no beginning. Yeah, just like matter. Matter, there's no beginning to the continuum of matter. Matter exists in different forms, right? So all the different permutations that matter exists in, those are all new each moment. They've never existed before in that permutation. But well, maybe not, probably not. Well, not, yeah, you could say not at that time. It's like there's always some kind of qualifier you have to add to try to avoid contradiction. But yeah, but just the continuum of matter, being something, things being, or matter existing, that has no beginning. I think, I'm not 100%. I'm not most of these things. It's always open to a question. But hold on. So before we digress anymore and lose all our time meditating, so the main point here is that anything that's our mind and us as a person, us as and also our mind, is impermanent. Or whatever is impermanent is also a cause, means it's producing effects that will arise subsequently. And whatever is a cause is also an effect. And then I was saying, oh yeah, so I was looking at the different, what if something is not an effect, either it doesn't exist or it has always existed, right? So it never newly existed, which is one of these kind of debates arose. Or it or it was not produced by causes. Sorry. So if something is an effect, right? If something is not an effect, it means either it doesn't exist, or it exists, but it was not produced by causes, right? So for something to be an effect means it's produced by causes. Yeah. So this leads into actually. So before there's a lot of other questions that arise. Actually, I'll try to, instead of asking all the questions that arise in my mind that I think I have to answer, I'll just not answer those and see what questions you guys actually have. So answer and try to answer those. But before we actually meditate, then I just want to mention one last thing. I promise. Permanence. Remember, I was saying all phenomena that exist can be divided into impermanent phenomena and permanent phenomena. Right? So it's helpful to contrast. So we can understand impermanent phenomena better by looking at permanent phenomena. So you can already guess maybe what does it mean to be permanent? It means to be not changing, right? Remember, the definition of a permanent phenomena is that which is momentarily changing. So the definition of a permanent phenomena is basically the opposite. Something that exists, but is not momentarily changing. Right. So so a good example. So I have to give you some examples. An example of a permanent thing. Try to use a different example than I usually use. See about this. Oh yeah, here. I like this example. Let's just debating with someone the other day. This example I remember. So I'll come back to my watch again. My watch is an impermanent thing, right? But then we can take a fact about the watch. Like, is this is this one thing or two things? We can say it's one thing, right? I think we can agree. Can you agree, Paul, that this is one thing? Okay, it's not easy, but it is agreed. It was Myers saying no, it's not one thing. Okay, we can agree it's one watch at least, right? Is this one watch or two watches? It's one watch, right? So, so the fact that this is one watch, does that fact change from moment to moment? No. See, the watch itself, it's changing moment to moment. It's become older. It's becoming older each moment. The molecules are moving, the hands are moving. It's all the physical stuff about the watch is changing. You used to think, I mean, it helps to see change. Think about on the level of atoms and electrons. You know, the electrons are orbiting. You know, this watch is composed of many atoms. Each atom, the molecular structure, the electrons that are part of the, the atomic structure of the atom, they're continually in motion, right? So changing moment to moment, not to mention, the cogs inside and the hands moving and so forth. So the watch is changing moment to moment. It's impermanent. But the fact that this is one watch, right? This is one watch. The fact that this is one watch, that fact is not changing from moment to moment. That's the fact that this is one watch. Yeah, you can say. You can say being a watch does not change. That's the same. I was just trying to make it a little more obvious because that being a watch is a little bit more difficult to see. So, but I'm sticking with, this example. I think it's a little more clear. The fact that this is one watch, that fact does not change moment to moment. So that is something that exists and it doesn't change moment to moment. Another thing, a more typical example that we usually use to illustrate impermanent phenomena is a non-affirming negation, it's called. So I didn't really want to bring that up. Well, I mean, basically, we can think about this. I'll make a simple example, like the fact that I'm not a cat. Am I a cat? No, I can meow, but I'm not a cat. I'm a human just imitating a cat. I meow. So the fact that, I'm not a cat, or the fact that none of you are cats, that is a fact about us, right? And although we are changing moment to moment, that fact about us does not change moment to moment. So that might seem insignificant or just something silly, but I'm just trying to give you an illustration of how something can exist, but also not be changing moment to moment, right? And thereby be permanent, be something that is, and it doesn't, by permanent, we don't mean that something, it doesn't have to be something that has always existed or always will exist. That's not, I mean, permanent is used in that way sometimes, but usually not. Usually in the context of Buddhist philosophy. Usually when we mean something is permanent, we mean it's something that exists, but it's not changing moment to moment. Okay, so why don't we stop there with my kind of explanation, and then we'll meditate. So what we want to meditate on is looking at the impermanence of our first, we'll just stick with our mind, the impermanence of our mind in different ways, and including in how our mind is both an effect and how it's a cause. Right? So take a few deep breaths, wiggle around in your seat if you have to. Kind of get ready to meditate. So get comfortable in your meditation posture. So briefly scan through your body to see that you're comfortable. Remember the different points of the posture. The legs crossed in a comfortable seated position. The spine and torso erect and straight, balanced. We're not falling to the right or left or front or back, but not tight, relaxed. And then the shoulders broad and open and level. Then the hands in the lap, right hand on top of left, tips of the thumbs touching. And then the chin slightly tucked in. The gaze, one's gaze falling at a 45-degree angle down. And then relax, especially make sure the muscles around the eyes, and the cheeks, and jaws are relaxed. And let your eyelids kind of half close. And then the teeth and the lips and jaw just resting in natural position. And then the tip of the tongue gently touching the roof of the mouth, of the gums, just behind your front teeth. So let's begin by just being aware of all the objects of our sense consciousness, right? We'll kind of start out by observing kind of outwardly and then gradually going within. So just begin by, being aware of what's appearing to your eyes, to your eye sense consciousness, of your field of vision, without looking at anything, if you're like focusing on anything. Try to let your gaze rest unfocused in space, but just be aware of the light, shapes, and colors that's appearing to your, and then be aware of the sounds appearing to your ears. And so we're looking at impermanence, right? So especially try to be aware of any change, however subtle, in your field of vision. So is it the case that as external objects in your field of vision change, your eye sense consciousness perceives that change, right? And so is it the case that with each change in the external objects in your field of vision, that your eye sense consciousness itself changes, in that it newly perceives something it didn't perceive before? And then shift your attention to your ear sense consciousness, and just be aware of whatever sounds arise to your ears, your ear sense consciousness. So notice how the sounds appearing, how they arise and pass away, without ceasing. They're changing continually. So observe how the change of the sounds. There's not a moment when sounds are not changing. They arise and pass away, arise and pass away. And at the same time, your ear sense consciousness, which is aware of the sounds, is it not the case that it is also changing and that it's newly perceiving each moment of the sounds? Mm. And now shift your attention to your mental sense consciousness. So that consciousness, that mind, that is not arising directly in dependence upon the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, or body. Right? That stream of consciousness within, which gives rise to thoughts, which contains memories, and so forth, as we described yesterday. And the one which also is the observer, is meditating, right? Is the main observer now. And try to see how it is changing moment by moment. Is your stream of mental consciousness, is it changing each moment? Is it a permanent? So remember the definition of mind or consciousness that we gave yesterday. We discussed yesterday a lot. That which is clear and knowing. So remember, especially, consciousness is clear, and that any object can appear to it, and no particular perception is fixed in the awareness or in the space of our mind. And our mind is knowing, and that it's continually, is that power of kind of being aware of things, of engaging with or cognizing or knowing, in the sense of experiencing something. So I'm mentioning that just to try to help you focus on the stream of consciousness, the stream of awareness, the stream of the mental consciousness in the present moment. And now I encourage you to especially try to pay attention to how does it, or ask the question to yourself, how is it, we can see our mental consciousness changing moment by moment. But what is it that gives rise to each moment of mental consciousness? It's like water springing from the ground, fresh spring water arising from the ground. In each moment, stream of consciousness is arising into the present. But where does it come from? How does it arise from the previous moment? Try to reflect on that for a few minutes. And then look at how, not only, looking at the stream of consciousness arising in the present moment, not only does it arise from the previous moment, right? So it's an effect of the causes that have gone before, especially it's an effect of the moments of consciousness that immediately proceeded in each moment. So now look at how it's a cause. Right? So try to look how your mind, in each moment, it produces the subsequent moment of awareness, right? The subsequent moment of mind. So try to keep your focus on the present moment, on either the observer, yourself, or observing the stream of consciousness, and try to see how it produces subsequent moments of consciousness in each moment. Mhm. Okay, so relax your attention there. So now I'll take any questions that you have. We have a half hour left. I think there might be some questions in the chat already.
My camera's not working today, but I have a comment. And Adi Shanti, who I listen to sometimes, said an interesting thing was that the thoughts arise in our mind. We don't ask them to arise, and then we believe them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he said, isn't that crazy?
Yes, it is crazy. Don't do that. Well, it depends. I mean, some thoughts that arise in our mind are correct, and some thoughts we arise in our mind are mistaken. But yeah, the crazy thing is when we, especially, well, one is we conflate our thoughts with us, right? So, I was thinking about this actually for this session. There's a really good book by Jeffrey Schwartz, who's a psychologist and neuroscientist at I think UCLA, and he has a book called, maybe Shanti, can you look it up online? I think it's called, oh, it's about how to treat OCD. Basically, his main research is treating obsessive compulsive disorder. And he's got a kind of famous 4-step kind of method for treating obsessive compulsive disorder. What is that book called? You Are Not Your Brain. I think that's what it's called. You Are Not Your Brain, something like that. So he makes very strong arguments against the materialist view that our mind is just the activity of our brain. But he makes this very point that you're making, Kevin, which is that, you know, in his 4-step method, one of the main steps is to recognize. So you imagine when people have obsessive compulsive disorder, they have these obsessive thoughts where they think again and again, for example, oh, I have to wash my hands, even though they just washed their hands like 5 minutes ago. Or I have to check if the door is locked. You know, they come back from outside, and then, I mean, different people have different kind of symptoms, right, or different compulsions, but come back from outside and then come back to their apartment and come inside and lock the door. But then 5 minutes later think, oh, I'm not sure if I locked the door. But he was saying rationally, they know they just locked the door 5 minutes ago. But the thought that I have to go and check to see if the door is locked is so strong that it's really painful to not follow it. So then it's kind of easier just to follow that. But then it leads into this very compulsive behavior, which can become really problematic, right? Like when you move in with someone and you're driving them crazy because you're checking every 5 minutes if the door is locked. So he's saying one of the most helpful one of the really important things for people with such a condition is to recognize this very thing, that we are not our thoughts. Our thoughts, some of our thoughts, you know, we think voluntarily and intentionally. We think about something. Like when we're just meditating now, and if you're following like the instruction I was giving, then you're intentionally thinking about something, right? So that's one kind of thought. But as I was mentioning yesterday, many of the thoughts that arise, like when we get really angry or we're jealous or when we're really worried and fearful, many thoughts that arise in our mind, they just arise unbeckoned, involuntarily. You know, we don't, not that we don't have control, but we didn't intentionally have those thoughts arise. They just arise in our mind. And those are, so in the Buddhist context, those thoughts are very clearly a result of karma and habituation, a mental habituation. But one big mistake we make is especially when we have destructive thoughts arise. Like, you know, so this is very prominent. We can easily see in the case of like low self-esteem. When we have negative thoughts about ourselves, we make one small mistake and then we make this cognitive, what's it called? There's what is it? What is CBT? Behavioral therapy. What is in CBT? What does the C stand for? Cognitive behavioral therapy. Oh, in cognitive behavioral therapy, there's some really helpful points that are very similar to Buddhism. That well, we make this kind of I don't know. It's one kind of error, but it's a kind of cognitive error. Whereas if we make if we make one small mistake, then we generalize that about ourselves. Like, I'm just a stupid person. Why? Because I just made one small mistake. You know, that's a gross generalization. It's a totally inaccurate generalization, right? So and we tend to, like in the case of low self-esteem or self-hatred, even in an extreme form, when we only see, you know, negative things that we've done, or that, and that totally it blinds us to seeing any positive things we've done. So if we make one small mistake, we think, oh, I'm such an idiot, I'm such a bad person, I'm such a foolish person, how could I do that? Like, this is the story of my life, it's just one mistake after another. And we don't, and it blinds us to see, at that time, we can't see any of the positive things we've done. You know, it's not that they're not there, they're there if we can look, but we so much identify with this destructive thought that and you know, so we and not only, well, this is like the destructive thought takes up, or the negative thought takes up all the space in our mind. It's like there's no more space left for us to have a more objective, neutral perspective on what's going on what we are as a person, on what's happening in our mind. So like I was saying yesterday, also in relation to a comment by Kevin, was that that's one of the big benefits yeah, of doing mindfulness meditation in general, but especially of doing this kind of meditation on the mind, is to see that we, first of all, we are not our mind. Our mind is something that we possess. So we can have some control over it. And secondly, that everything, all the things that arise in our mind, also, we're not reducible to any of the thoughts or perceptions that arise in our mind. So another thing is helpful here is that all the thoughts and perceptions and feelings and judgments, this is good, this is bad, those are just adventitious. They're temporary. They arise. They didn't exist always in the past. They've arisen, they arise at a specific time, and they won't always exist in the future, even when they've arisen. They will pass away. Things change. So impermanence has a big positive side to it, which is that no matter how bad things are, they will not remain that way. They will change. Things will definitely change, right? That can help sometimes, when things are really not going well. Is just think, well, if I just sit and bear it, even I don't do anything, things will change, right? But it's also not the case that we can't do anything. Like, we can do things to make things better. But then the point I was kind of digressing from here is that, yeah, we make a big mistake where we over-identify with our thoughts, where especially when negative thoughts arise. So especially it's the case in context of low self-esteem, when we have we have these very strongly critical attitudes, critical thoughts, critical opinions about ourselves, that we and I mean, similar cases with obsessive compulsive order, when we have this compulsive thought that I have to do this. When that arises in the mind, if we can just take a step back, so generate this perspective at that time, generate this perspective of being a neutral observer of my own mind and seeing that this is a thought that's arising in my mind, right? This is not me. So I, as a person, I have a choice about how to relate to this thought, right? So we're creating space between the thoughts and the feelings that exist in our mind and us as a person, right? Before we generate that perspective of a neutral observer, there is no space between me and my thoughts and my reactions. All right. Okay. So, oh yeah, you are not your brain. Yeah, Shanti's put it in the chat, and then Kevin's put another book in the chat. I'm not familiar with, so before we generate this perspective of an observer, there's no space between us and the thoughts and emotions and judgments and so forth that arise in our mind. But if we can stop, so in a moment, in a heated moment of anger or jealousy or whatever, we might not be able to do this. But at least at the beginning we can't do it. Eventually we can, but at least when we come back to our apartment after an hour or two, we cool down and we have time to do some meditation. We can sit on our meditation cushion and remember that time, just an hour, a few hours, or a few days ago, when we were overwhelmed by this kind of negative thoughts and emotions. And at that time, we can create this space. Look at what was, try to put ourselves in that situation again, and then step back and take the position of an objective observer, a neutral observer, looking at the whole process of this destructive emotion like arising in our mind. Start with before it arose, the moments before, and then look at all the things that triggered us, all the different conditions that came together, and then how the emotion arose, what was happening in our mind, and then remember I mentioned yesterday, look at the physical cues that we have on our body. How did our body feel also? Because that helps us to be aware of what's happening. Those physical cues in our body are very kind of easy to identify signposts for what's happening in our mind as well. So then, and then look at how it arose, and then at its height, what were we thinking, what were we feeling, and then but then try to take a more objective and rational analysis of, well, was that what I said, was it justified? What I was thinking, was that really true, or was it distorted in some way? What I was feeling, was that a result of really of some kind of just immediately what was happening then, or was I relating to events that happened a long time ago and they're just similar? Was it a kind of part of a habitual way of reacting to this kind of situation or not? So we can analyze in all those different ways. But through all that analysis, I mean, a kind of basis for that analysis. And one thing that that kind of analysis makes clear is that, our thoughts and emotions that arise, we're not reducible to those. Those are events that happen in our mental continuum, in our existence as a person, but we're not reducible to those. We're something greater than those. And then that space, it makes it very clear to us that we have the ability to change. I can change, I can decide. The more we are conscious of the fact that thoughts, even when they involuntarily arise in our continuum, that they are just that. They're just thoughts arising in our continuum. The more we're conscious of that fact, the more we have space and we have power to be able to decide how we want to relate to those thoughts. So again, back to this example of people with obsessive compulsive disorder. Jeffrey Schwartz was saying, I mean, and he's done many clinical, trials with many people. So he's saying that people find extremely helpful. Well, I think the first step is just learning mindfulness meditation, just learning about focusing your attention in a conscientious way. And then I think the second step is like just recognizing that they have a disorder. So, and I mean, any of us, we have afflictive emotions, we have a disorder. That is a disorder. Any sentient being basically has a disorder in terms of having afflictive emotions. And then third step, recognizing that those negative thoughts or obsessive thoughts, that they are not us, right? It's just something that arises. And also it's not inevitable that they always are there. They weren't always there in the past. They don't always have to be there in the future. And we can decide how to relate to those, right? We can make a decision about, do I want to follow that thought, or do I not want to follow that thought? Do I want to recognize it as something that if I follow, it's just going to lead me down a bad path that I've been before? It's just going to lead me into more, kind of negativity. It's going to lead me into harmful speech, or speech that's harmful to others, or physical actions that are harmful to myself or harmful to others. And so I don't want to follow it. So we can make a decision not to follow. And then, but just deciding not to do something is one thing, but not doing it, of course, is over time is the difficulty, right? So one thing that's really helpful then is to redirect that energy into a positive direction, right? So to do something positive instead of just not doing something negative is really not enough, right? It's not sustainable. We need to redirect that energy into a positive direction. So for making of a concrete example, like, there's this person that maybe lives nearby or lives in the same community that just drives you crazy, right? They just the way they talk, the way they walk, the way they move is just annoying for whatever reason, right? And so that, right, from many past experiences, this person just really annoys me. With me, it's just that we have this karma, or I have this certain set of opinions or a certain set of habituation from the past that the things they do really trigger me to react in a negative way. So just knowing that, then we look at our past experience with that person. Well, what specific things they do? What are the specific things they do that really annoy me the most, right? And then we prepare ourselves for the future. Well, I know when I meet them again, like inevitably they're going to do these things. Like I know I can give it a small example, kind of an innocuous example here in my house, because I live in a house with other monks, right, in the monastery. So there's one monk who he's like, I don't know, what do you call someone who they it's like, oh, they have 5 thumbs. It's like he has 5 thumbs. No, he's so uncoordinated with his hands that he always drops things. This other monk, he's much better now. Now he doesn't, but a few years ago, it's like, every time I can almost predictably, predict that at some point during the day, because we live in a house that has a big courtyard in the middle. It's like rooms around a big courtyard, so you can hear the sounds from the other rooms quite easily. And we have a communal kitchen, So you can almost predict that you're going to hear like, and we have metal plates, luckily, like because of all the, otherwise all our plates will be broken by now. So we have metal plates, stainless steel plates, which is common in India. But you can almost predict, like at some point during the day, you're going to hear a metal plate drop in the kitchen, and it's going to be that monk. You know, it's like they're so uncoordinated with the hands, and it used to drive me crazy. I'd be like, why can't he just learn how to hold things? You know, you think it's not that complicated. Like hold the plate firmly as you wash it so it doesn't fall. It's not that complicated. But anyway, but so there's certain things that people do that annoy us, that trigger us and trigger our kind of irritation, and then that can lead us, if we're not careful, it can lead us down this whole path of like other criticisms, other things I don't like about that person and this whole history, and really lead us to be really upset and angry at the person for just something that's quite innocuous, right? So we can especially see this in our families, like with our parents. Like you probably all had the experience of have some family, you know, one of your friends, like especially when we're adolescents, one of your friends come over to spend the day at your house, and your mother or father do something seems quite innocuous and minor, say something, do something, and it just sets you off. You get really annoyed and puts you in a really bad mood. And your friend is like, what happened? Like, why are you so annoyed? It's all your parents did was say this or do that. Like, what's to be so upset about? But for you, it's related to a whole other like history, like emotional history of the parent. So thing is, we know there's certain triggers we have with certain people, and we know that in a future situation, you know, that trigger is going to happen. They're going to do that thing that really annoys us. So we have to prepare ourselves for when they do that. You know, how do I want to relate? And that annoyance, okay, the annoyance is going to arise in the mind, uncalled for. That's this kind of involuntary thought or emotion that arises in the mind. But we can, in that very moment, so especially if we catch it when it's small, when it's weak, we can take this perspective of an observer and see, okay, now I see that annoyance, you know, that negative thought, that critical thought, that thought of that emotion of irritation. Now it's arisen in my mind. So we can look at it instead of just being that irritation, being an irritated person, we can kind of step back and say, oh, irritation has arisen in my mind. How do I want to relate to it now? Do I just want to follow it? Or do I want to try to, like, I mean, a healthy attitude is just be curious about it. Just be curious, like, where did it arise from? What is it? You know, this irritating feeling, like, how does it exist? Where is it in my body? Is it in my body or is it outside of me? Is it me or is it something else? Is it my mind? If it's my mind, is it like my eye consciousness or my body sense consciousness, or is it my mental consciousness? And yeah, and like, is it changing moment by moment? I mean, you can ask all these kind of questions about it in the present moment. And you'll see automatically, just by that, it starts to get weaker. Just by doing that, it starts to get weaker. But the point is not to distract ourselves. We don't want to, the technique is not to distract ourselves just by thinking about other things rather than thinking about the thing we're irritated about. But we do, because we sincerely should try to learn more about, we need to learn more about these negative kind of thoughts and emotions that we have. So we sincerely do want to learn about it. But just doing that already does reduce the energy of it. And then we can, first of all, we just want to investigate to learn more about it. And then second step is, well, is there a different way I can think about this thing this other person does that annoys me? Is there a different way I can think about it? You know, that doesn't cause me to be irritated? One thing that can help with that is to think, well, does everybody get irritated by this thing? Like for me, you know, the other people live in my house, when they hear the plate drop in the kitchen at like 3 p.m, well, does everyone else in the house get irritated by that? And I can take a poll. I can go survey the other months. So you can actually ask other people that person you get irritated at, you probably there's other people who know that person that you know as well. Ask them, how do they relate? And usually we'll find other people, they relate in a very different way, you know? And then that helps us to see that our way of relating that is just, that. It's just our opinion. There's nothing objectively bad about the other person often. I mean, sometimes maybe there really is. I mean, sometimes there are some really kind of objectively bad things people do, like murder, like, for example. But many of the things that we get drive us really crazy. It's like other people, it doesn't faze them at all. And then even if it is, but and then yeah, anyway, this is all kind of mind training. But then also, is there a positive way? Is there any positive aspect to that thing? Is there a silver lining, right, to the cloud? Is there a half full part of that, the glass half full part? Is there any positive aspect? So remember, I was talking about the headache, thinking about a headache yesterday. You could think it's exhausting my negative karma, or I created the cause to experience this disturbing, this painful experience. I created the cause for that by causing someone else to experience something similar in the past. So therefore, I need to change my actions in order that I don't have this kind of harmful experience in the future. And also, this is an opportunity for me to practice patience. And also, this is an opportunity for me to practice, to generate compassion, right? So there are all these different kind of mind training techniques. This is all part of mind training. But it all starts with, I mean, the ability to actually apply those techniques all starts with mindfulness, right? And the best kind of mindfulness in this case is not just watching our breath, it's watching our own mind, right? Yeah. Okay. So you have maybe there's probably just time for one more question before we stop. So any live questions here from the Zoom room?
Hello, Venerable.
Yes.
I had a question about the smallest interval of time. So you say for a normal person, it's a certain amount, but actually there's no limit, right? If you're able to, there's
No,
no
no, no. Of
really
course.
smallest moment.
No, that we can. No, no, no. There's no real shortest moment of time. No, that's according to the Abhidharma. What I said, I think it's 65. A youthful person's finger snap, the duration of a finger snap, which is less than a second already. So you can divide that in, I think it's 1/65th of that, according to Abhidharma. But according to Kalachakra Tantra, I think it's 365th of that time. But yeah, that's just a convention, though. There's no smallest moment of time. I mean, really, I mean, anything that exists, it has a duration and time. And, you can always divide it further, basically. Like similarly, I mean, you think about a smallest molecule. There's no smallest particle in Buddhist philosophy, because by definition, a particle, it has to occupy some space. As soon as something occupies space, it has sides, right? It has, there's like, if there's two particles, there's a side where they're closer together and a side that's away from you. There's a side where they're connecting, touching, and a side, or towards each other, and a side that they're apart from each other, right? So there's no smallest particle, there's no smallest moment, unit of time. Okay, another question? Yes. How do you say your name? Kacha?
Kaisa, yes.
Kaisa.
Kaisa, yes.
Okay, what's the question?
I have a question regarding these disturbing emotions. So I feel some emotions are quite hard to catch, while others, which maybe have become sort of a state of being, like depression, or if you're a compulsive overachiever, it's quite hard to catch those. Do you have any thoughts? Like, is it just to practice a lot of mindfulness to really expand your awareness? How to catch those like more destructive state of beings?
Yeah. Well, I guess it's probably I mean, it's a skill, right? Being aware of what's going on in our, what's happening in our mind is a skill. So you get better and better at it. So as you get better and better at it, you catch more and more subtle, well, I mean, not because it's not only a matter of catching negative things that are going in our mind. We also want to be more aware of positive things. We all have positive things happening in our mind, but too often we're not aware of those. We just overlook those and only look for the negative things. So being aware of what's happening in our mind is a skill. So as we get better at it, we have a more nuanced awareness of what's happening in our mind, and we notice more and more subtle details of what's happening. Just like, if you study biology, if you never study biology and you take a walk in the forest, you notice the very obvious things, the big trees, some of the leaves, the grass. But if you study biology and you go walking in the forest again and again and again, you notice more and more and more and more subtle things. The texture of the soil, the color, the more detailed kinds of lichens and moss that grow here and there, and all kinds of, and the different shading on the bark and all kinds of things. You notice more and more as you gain knowledge, you gain experience, you gain skill, and also you give interest. The more we give interest to something, the more we understand it with more and more detail and nuance. So it's true what you say, that some negative emotions or thoughts, they arise, and it's very easy to identify. Like anger is one of the easiest, or jealousy, I think, is quite easy to identify. But some, they exist, like this kind of being an overachiever, or kind of, very subtle dissatisfaction with oneself, or very subtle, like negative messaging about oneself that can, the longer it exists, the more difficult we become, more habituated to it, more used to it, more familiar with it. So the more difficult it is to identify it, because it's just part of the everyday experience. So I think the technique is to just practice regularly, looking at one's own mind again and again. So that's why, this kind of meditation that we're doing, it's kind of like physical exercise. If you just do once or twice, even if you just do once or twice a week, you won't really see your skill and ability to do it increasing much. So it's best if you can do every day or twice a day, at least half an hour a day. At least, like they say with physical exercise, it's the same parameters. Physical exercise, they say the minimum kind of to see, well, I don't know if it's true, but a minimum is like at least 30 minutes, at least like 4 to 5 times a week, right? To stay physically healthy, you kind of need to have that much exercise. What I've heard. So I think meditation is kind of the same. Best if you can do at least half an hour every day. If you can't do that, do at least half an hour, like 4 or 5 times a week. But even better than that, if you can do, say, 45 minutes every morning, 45 minutes every evening. And then if you can do that much, like you'll see. And here, I mean, I can say something more about the quantity later, because the importance is not the long duration. At the beginning, when we're learning to meditate, we want to keep one session quite short, right? So start with 15 or 20 minutes. So that you have a high quality of attention for the full duration of the meditation session. If you start with a long duration, with a long meditation session, like 45 minutes for some people, then, at the beginning, the first 20 minutes, you might have a good quality of attention. But then the last 25 minutes, you're becoming tired and your mind is more and more distracted, and you don't enjoy it, one. And also you just become habituated to sitting without being able to focus on anything really, which is a bad habit, right? So we want to keep the meditation sessions short at the beginning so we can stay focused quite well for the full duration of the session. And then even if it's going well, by the end of your 15 or 20 minutes, stop anyway. And then take a 5-minute break and then do another 15 or 20 minute session, right? And then when you're quite confident, you can consistently have a good quality of attention through the full 15 or 20 minutes, then extend it by 5 minutes, right? and then practice like that for another few weeks until again you see you can consistently have a good 25-minute session, then extend it by 5 minutes until you so slowly build up the time like that. But you'll see, yeah, basically as we watch, we generate this skill. I mean, one is the skillfulness. We become more, we know what to do in different situations. When different things happen in our mind as we're observing it, we kind of, through experience, we know how to deal with it to stay focused and focused on what we want to stay focused. But another thing is, it's like the energy of our ability to concentrate on one thing. It builds up, it becomes stronger. So we have a better ability to stay focused on different aspects of our experience, of our mind. And then by doing that, we become aware of more and more subtle things. And as just like I was saying before, as we become aware of something, looking at it in an objective way, then we gain more space of objectivity. Well, we're the neutral observer, and we can see more clearly, like what's happening in our mind, right? And then that gives us more power to be able to make a conscious decision about how to react to it, whether to continue, thinking and feeling in that way. But something like, being an overachiever or having, I mean, how do you relate that to what's going on in the mind? The overachiever is the person, right? So what's happening in the mind, you have to look at, analyze. Like, I think it's related to thoughts of like always moving the bar higher, achieving one thing, but always thinking that's not enough. I have to do better. I have to do better, which is indirectly telling oneself what I've done is not good enough. As I am now is not good enough. So, I mean, for something like depression or being an overachiever, it's not a simple thing. It's a very complex thing, which consists of a lot of different thoughts, right? And a lot of different kinds of emotions. So by looking at it again and again, though, gradually we sort of untangle that whole web of different thoughts, which leads us into feeling depressed, or leads us into being an overachiever. And then when we deal with each thought, each moment, each thought, each emotion, each situation, we deal with one by one. And gradually we create a whole new kind of world for ourselves, a whole new persona, a whole new reality of our experience, the way we experience the world. So it's just one step by one step. It's got, I mean, again, analogous to working out, you want to improve your whole body, but your whole body is made up of different muscle groups, right? Different parts of your body. So one day you work out your arms and your biceps, another day you work out your quads, another day, by focusing on one part of, and then you also try to improve your diet, you also try to improve your sleep, it's you focus on one thing at a time, and gradually you can recreate, you improve your entire health. It's similar with the mind. Okay, we've used up, we're at the end of our time for this first session. So we'll take a 2-hour break now, and then come back. So maybe let's briefly dedicate by whatever positive energy we've created in this session. Then may we all be able to transform our minds in a positive way, identify all of our afflictive emotions, and learn to gradually reduce and eliminate them, and identify our positive emotions, positive states of mind that we already have, and be able to increase them. And those we don't have, may we newly acquire. So in short, may all sentient beings be free from every form of suffering and have every happiness of the fulfillment. Okay, so let's take a 2-hour break, and then we come back. So see you. Bye-bye.